Um, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Syakakap alak. Intat pabian pabianteu rej lenimak taklaklak lenokibal re lekiche kokopal ayam apabianteu. Nah, spiritual guide from the Mayan traditions, specifically the Quiche traditions. Well, today there's an special point, or there's a special subject that we can talk about, and it is like I have been asked in the last days by some people about what is the Maya viewpoint, or what is in the highlands deep in the mountains that seems not to be that affected by the presence of mestizo culture, or by even by Western, or by like Halloween stuff. Which is the real, or which is the Maya conception of the Day of the Dead? What is this, that is this, or how it is this based on the Maya calendar, or which are the things to take into account for to understand the Day of the Dead? And I have been asked, and I was peculiarly surprised that people were asking about that before the moment has arrived. But but I found it but I found it very interesting, because I wasn't asked about that before, and now that I'm thinking now that I began to think in the questions and the answers, now I'm very happy understanding more deep about this. And one of the first things is that, as I said in different times, everything is alive. And when we talk about death, for example, in the sense of the deceased ones, or when we talk about this moment in which we summon, or that we call, even if in prayers, or just by the culture process of understanding, or being in the middle of a day of death, curiously, and peculiarly, the same principle is applied. Uh, and there's even a peculiar phrase that goes like, those who are dead in a way by living in a way, in another way, are alive in another way. There's even ceremonial phrases that goes like that, like, I talk to you dead in a way, but alive in another way. Well, then that's the first principle, and that is something that happens. And I'm now that I'm thinking in different answers. I'm going to blend it together at the end. There's this beautiful and interesting stuff that always happens in between Kichean people and people in my own town, Nahuel Ha and Se Ha, that you have to understand well. You have to really understand what people are talking, what people are saying when in conversation about something. Because whenever a person begins to talk about a deceased one, mostly is kind of understood because you live in the community. So if you begin to talk about your father, or if you begin to talk about your grandmother or something like that, and you already live in town, well, you already know if they are deceased. But if you arrive to a new family, or if you don't really have good skills, let's say in the language, there's going to be a moment in which you are going to get very confused. Why? Because we talk about the people in present time. We don't talk about them as deceased. So, for example, let's say I am in a consultation, and then there comes this person that asks me about something, and he can begin to say in present time, using present time verbs and subjects, like, my grandfather is in the fields when suddenly he hears a thunder, for example. And they can continue, and they can say, well, and my grandmother was in the kitchen, and she is in the kitchen, and she's preparing the food. And you have to really listen to what is development of the story that the person is going to say, is telling you, and later that person is going to ask a question and goes on to that. But if you don't pay enough attention, you're going to be very confused, because everything is said in present time. Everything is told as if they were present, and that is the main point. And that is what I try to. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Even by language, all this ceremonial knowledge, all these ceremonial poetic ways of introducing knowledge to people, or the ways in which we sing, the way in which we behave, in these ways, this poetic way, and this, even in the average conversation, will always contemplate them like and talked as if they were alive, if they are in present time. So there's a moment in which you can stop and say, hey, Lash, come, yeah, just come, your nana, your tata, those your let's say, like, are they already dead? Very humbly but ashamed, you can say, well, stop, I don't understand anymore. Well, that's something that I really love about this culture. Talk about the death as in present. So they go to the field, so she's in the kitchen, and whenever a person is told, talked in that way, is a way of not only preserving the memory but preserving the presence, which should be something. I don't know, now that people is so interested in what those the play of linguistics and neuroscience of linguistic plays in the brain, would be very interesting, which is the change or the shift, or what is the specific approach that can change in the mind or in the consciousness whenever you consider and whenever you talk about death as living persons. It is peculiar. I love those ways. I love to talk about that. Now I am the one that is confusing my friends by talking about how lovely my mother is and how lovely she is with me, but not in past or past tense, but in present time. And sometimes I have to score, because now I follow the rules. Even when talking in different languages, I follow the rules of what is the ways of, or the poetic ways of doing the doing the conversation about the deceased one. So they are alive in a sense, but they are dead in a sense. But there's always a way of conceive them over there, because when we Mayans, we don't believe in reincarnation, so there's no necessity for to think in the transmutations of souls, and we don't even apply the word soul anymore to what is the container of yourself, or your manifestation of your character, or your, let's say, your conduct. um, we talk about consciousness now, based on the use of the word ushlab, ushlabshik, ushlamballa, and all the ways of making, of using the basic morpheme about breathing and life, consciousness. So another thing that I take into account is that we don't believe in reincarnation or the transmutation of a soul. We do believe, or what we follow is the fact, as I mentioned in my book, that the baby is fully conscious, and that consciousness appears in your consciousness appears when you are in your mother's womb. So at the moment of death, we don't believe that all of this is going to go to another body, because that is disrespectful for the role of the mother during pregnancy. It's taking away that beautiful part from femininity. What we do say is that that lab, or that inner, that deep, that primal way of a consciousness goes back to the earth as Ushlag, the breathing of the earth. So what we said is not that we go to heaven or that we go to sky, because there's no way. We base no things in God against the devil or stuff like that. We base that just in basic fact. We don't believe there's a heaven to go or a punishment place back down in earth. No, we said that we go back to the breathing of the world. In the middle of the mist, in the middle of the cold, in the middle of the cold winds of the mountains, we breathe with the earth. We return, in a sense, to what is the breathing of the earth. We return to nature. It's more than reincarnation, it's like recycling in this sense. And in that sense, we are following what nature does with everything. And that is another, and when talking about death or beginning to talk about the Day of the Dead, that's something that is also already on culture, that is also already on the living day by day ways of considering your ancestors to be a part of nature now, or that they walk in the middle of the breath or the breezes of the world. But you talk about them in present time, right? As I said. So arriving to the day of the dead is not necessarily like summoning them to come as it is usually believed or as is usually done in some more syncretic, let's say, communities in which there's already an affectation over the culture, like they are somewhere and now we're going to call them and offering them food or offering them a place to stay or offering something special for them. In this case, it's not like that division when the Day of the Dead or when this special um, celebration is done. In reality, we already have them present. We already talk to them. We already talk in present time. And by the way, in the ceremonial ways, for example, that I'm a spiritual guide, I was asked in the beginning of my initiation or my training or my learnship, I was asked, do you know who are the ones that are going to be more happy because you began this path? And I was like, science, I'm going to heal them, right? And I said, and my teacher says, no, well, I have no family in reality. Well, I do have a family, but well, maybe my family finally are going to recognize something good in me or something. I was playing fool, and he was very angry with me, and I was no, and I was oh my gosh, the animals, and I begin to play right. So I got him very upset with me. He says, think about, and then I was like, okay. And he says, well, the first one that are going to be happy because you become a spiritual guide are going to be your ancestors, because day by day you are going to call them. You are going to summon them in every ceremony. In every ceremony, you are going to offer fire and water to them. So they are going to be present every time that you made a ceremony. And by the way, they are going to be the keepers of your path. And due to the fact for us Mayans that they can see everything and that now they are more powerful because they have no body, they are going to see your path. They can protect you. They are going to be the happiest ever that you became a spiritual guide. And I was like, whoa. And yes, it is true for us that we're already providing ceremonial work and that we go to the ceremonies, to the mountains, to the caves, to the volcanoes. Yes, it is true. Our ancestors are summoned every single day. No, we don't wait for a specific let's say celebration. And another thing that I already mentioned, but that is very interesting, is also that I mentioned the body, right? And There's always something that goes on culture about being respectful of everybody or everything or anything in this world. That even if you perceive it, and even if you don't perceive that you have to be respectful. And it is said that the dead sometimes are even more powerful because they don't depend on the experience of the body to do manifestation or to be present. They whenever they are powerful, or whenever their way of a consciousness is still on the mountains, is still on the breezy ways of the world, whenever their consciousness is already still in the flowers, in the birds, in the trees, you can summon them. But they do not have the what is the big pressure of being human. Being human has a big pressure based on the maintenance of the body, on everything that you can mention that goes onto whatever, like energy, like healthiness, like growing, the decay, illness, perception, the perception of your own organ, of your, let's say, your organs of perception, the keenness of them. You know, being a human being is highly, highly pressured by your living experience through the body, or what the body is. If you will want to take to know something about you beyond the body, it is something that we don't do day by day. It's something we don't even think about it sometimes. But we do have extra, or maybe not corporeal, but not extra or metacorporeal experiences in consciousness that does not depend on the body. But we don't do that. We always do what goes with the body. So what we said is that those who has no body are powerful, more even more powerful, especially if their way of a consciousness is still breathing with the earth, because now they accompany the earth. And then we're always told to be respectful of every single being, dead or alive, in this let's say universe. So when the moment of the day of the death are approaching, that is the point. It's a celebration. It's just like a special party. But if I will make a comparison of what can this be, it's like, for example, if you have kids, you have to feed them every day. If you if you if you there's no single day, and 3 times a day that you have to be feed them, right? But whenever there's a special moment, you can do a party, and then you can offer something different, more elaborated, and more to them. Well, that's the metaphor of the day of the dead. There's a celebration that is special for, like, a special moment with different offerings and what is the average. But then at the finalization of the ceremony, then you can go onto that, like, okay, I already celebrate your party, but see you tomorrow. there's no there's no discontinuity, or there's no final bye-bye to your ancestor or to the deceased ones that are related to your blood, or not even to your blood, your teachers. So there's a continue. We live among the dead, and the dead live among us all the time. Day of the Dead is just a special offering because day by day they are present for us. And well, talking about a little bit deep in what is the celebration, well, we built this small house made of branches and some plants that is like a little house in which the consciousness of the dead can reside for a moment, in the moment in which you are going to offer a special, let's say, food or incense or fire, candles, water, alcoholic beverage, whatever, as what they consumed when they were alive. But the conception is that, and this goes, I have heard, to pre-Hispanic times, or to the ancient times of the Mayan culture, in which the bones of the dead were considered to be seeds. So when a person is put back in earth, it is told that those bones are seeds, and from those seeds, new new trees or new plants are going to come. So see, there's a spiritual way or a spirituality based on looking at nature. So you never die in a sense, and your consciousness can be there in the middle of the mountains. There's also could be the second death when your consciousness is not strong enough and does not go beyond the death of your physical body. But there could be a way in which you can be still present and alive. So that's something that I found fascinating, even fascinating to tell you, fascinating to say for the first time in this podcast, to say it in English, because it is peculiar how we live among the dead and the dead among us, and we all together move this universe or make the dynamics of this universe. And the Day of the Dead is just a moment to offering them something, but next day is the same. Bye bye, but see you tomorrow. And we have work to do, especially if you are a spiritual guide. You are going to summon your ancestors, and the specific ones connected and related with you for to help you or for to give you advice, uh, to protect your path, and let's say to enhance the powers of your healing powers or whatever, right? But whatever that you need or in which you can be the bridge for healing some other person. Well, this is the basic ideas. I'm just putting some ideas, blending some of the ideas in just one single big statement of what is not really consider them death.
Well, you said a lot of interesting things. The first thing I wanted to say is, when you talked about Ushlab, for me, when I really understood the idea of Ushlab, it was a kind of a revolution in my perception. It was really something to see, and the just translating the word Ushlab into steam, I thought was very, very helpful. And so now I think about it as steam, and so now I'm looking for it, or I'm seeing it, or I can see the steam or the ushlab in a plant, or the ushlab in, for example, my objects, or you know what I mean. And this concept is just for me so profound.
Well, it is beautiful to. That's why I'm always talking about. Um, when I talk about linguistics and when you do go onto the deep of understanding the Mayan language, and by the way, when I'm constantly saying that whenever you found something that you suspect to be a fraud, maybe it is, but especially if you ask the spiritual guide or the leader or I don't know, the trademark guru about how the linguistics of their language to explain what they are saying. 99% of what you does not knows about anything. In this case, for example, the snap should be something keen to understand. There are too many tricks, there's too many fake gurus doing cacao ceremonies and stupidity like that, and Arguelles stupidity like that goes into talking about consciousness. But what is consciousness? How do you define consciousness? Which is the specifics on the Mayan ways? And as you said, the Ushlab conceptualization and Ushlab for these specific ways of talking about being live or what we call dead, not physically present, is very peculiar and goes very deep onto understanding breathing, earth, irradiation. I'm not going to say the stuff because I don't want tricksters to. They should build their own knowledge based on the real stuff. But Ushlab gives you the idea of so many stuff can provide you guidance for to understand manifestations of different stuff without being, let's say, folklorical or without being stupidly spiritual or stuff like that. You can do it just by understanding this as a fact. Remember,
It's a
there was
practical idea. It's a very practical idea.
yeah, my teacher one day, my feminine teacher, my female teacher, one day told me, "You don't have to believe in my words. You have to prove it." And I said, because there was a way in which I was crossing to faith, because that happens to the apprentices. And that's why it's very important the figure of the teacher, because the teacher can produce a self-reflection image of the self in an apprentice, but the teacher should not do that. Should let the apprentice to go free and found their own ways. But usually, what the teacher does is just to create clones of
Right.
themselves. So my teacher saw that sometimes I was even crossing to faith stuff, and she says, "Stop, stop." She says, "This is not about a new faith, and this is not about changing faith. This is about going in the world without faith." And I was like, "Wow, this is a, this is my teacher. I'm going to stay." And the last time I told, right, like there was a moment in which I was shaking on my sandals for I was getting old. I was still, let's say, single. Whenever all my friends were building their houses, buying their cars, going well into building a world, I was harvesting corn in one of the most difficult places to produce corn. I was completely poor and alone in the mountains, and my teacher was preoccupied about that. She says, "Well, you're in the moment in which everybody is making building and doing materialistic stuff, and you are here with an old woman seated watching at the clouds." And I was like, "Yes, but it is because it's you." It is because you are so amazing, so don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. And that's why she says, "Well, you make the proper decision. You decided to stay. Now you can begin. You can talk about this because you earned this knowledge, and you suffered, but you decided to stay with me because I was very old and I'm about to die." And I said, "Well, thank you." But she said that. Now look, I'm going to plan the stuff. I know she already listens to me. I know she's on the breathing ways of the mountains, and every time I return close to her house, I know that I can feel her, that I can feel, that I can sense that Ushlap is still being living present over there, scolding people. She was the best at that, and whenever I
It's
felt
also in these
I
concepts.
what?
I said it's also in these concepts. Like a lot of these lessons and things are from her, and so to change the language, she is here.
Yeah. Yeah. She's
That
so
that
so interesting personality.
I'm starting to become a little bit familiar. I've heard you talk about her a lot, and I'm becoming more familiar with some of these concepts and teachings and stuff. And so I'm starting to see some of that personality or define stuff. I also wanted to say something about you said earlier about um, the cognition of using the language of present tense rather than past tense. It changes your perception. So,
Yes.
this is very fascinating
Yeah,
because if we say
and
was,
also
go ahead, yeah.
and also you have to, well, now in this moment you made this remark talking about the, let's say, the ones that has no body, because now there's no way to say dead. We'll say shkam,
The word
murió,
is bouillon,
shkam,
shikam.
shkam, shkamik, if they are already dead. But more on this, we use the present to talk about them. But also, which should be another shift or another beautiful thing that changed whenever you consider everything to be alive. Everything to hold a way of a consciousness that you have to respect, or at least to have into consideration. Let's say, because there's has to be an enormous shift in the way you deal with the world and the way in which you deal with yourself when you talk in these ways, or when you use your own language to consider everything to be alive, or everything having a pulse, or that there's a way of a consciousness that is not human, that is listening to you or watching you.
Well, it's one thing to say it, but it's another thing to perceive it, And so I feel like I'm slowly getting more comfortable, more familiar, And I can say, yeah, everything's alive, but do I sense it? Do I perceive that everything's alive? I don't know. Maybe I'm getting there. Perhaps, could be. But changing the language about, for example, talking about the dead in the present tense, that's quite a shift in perception. And I'll practice this for a few months, and I'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah, yes. Because there's, well, the other way creates a sense of separation that
Totally.
later are, that yeah, and that later are going to create, let's say, spaces for the hope, or spaces for
Uh,
the faith,
this is English
right?
language. Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's right.
It's going to create a sense that you have a place to, that you are going to go to a place when in reality you are in the place already. So yes, we should go deep into that, and maybe, as I said, well, the entire world can learn about changing or shifting stuff, because same stuff is applied, for example, to the baby, because we consider the baby to be alive, to be conscious during the life in pregnancy, but sometimes it's an idea that people say, nah, or people will not want to listen to that, or people will not want to go deep, or they are going to listen to me just like, oh, okay, there's another crazy native. But now, but now in my discourse, I have added also the deceased ones to be alive in a way, and dead in their way, and to consider them and to respect them, because they can even be more powerful. So just imagine.
Well, it's the same perception, actually, which is, it crosses over between the two.
Yeah,
Separation. That's fascinating. I'm going to chew on that one for a bit.
yeah, including everything. And
Slowly
remember,
getting there.
yeah, yeah. Well, this is the ways in which language, understanding, and living, following just perception as that, and not putting your human perception above everything. To learn about balance or equilibrium in the universe. And when you go a little bit and you practice, and guess what? That also can be applied. That sense of being alive can also apply to dreams. When you dream, what the dream tells you, what was the message. And there's also a sense, right? Because the one that receives the dreams is Yurushla, your deep primal way of a consciousness. So in this beautiful world of the Mayan knowledge, the death, the dreams, the conscious baby, and the every day in the Mayan calendar, the Nahual numeral Nahuals, everything is alive, right? Not human, but alive, with a specific way of sending messages and dialogues. And I love to talk about this. Well, I practice, as my teacher says, you don't have to believe in my words, you have to prove it.
in my case, it's like, how do you eat a cow is one bite at a time, you know? And so there's a whole cow here, and it's a lot. And to slowly perceive, just for example, just to say something, everything's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But to perceive that, that's a whole nother animal. So, you give me lots to chew on, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, there's an impact. Whenever a person is introduced to this knowledge, there's an impact in which you have to begin little by little change the ways, or not even change, but cleaning your perception ways to understand and to go deep. We are so stressed by only using the mind to analyze the universe. We can use different ways of understanding reality. And well, the purpose, well, although not declared as such, well, one of the purposes of the Mayan knowledge is to consider us to be in the middle of nature, being another bird, not the part that has to decide among everything, but for ceremonial purposes, for ceremonies, for everything that we do, we go on the correct or the appropriate way to talk about things is based on the, the, the linguistics and the ways of how we do day by day living. So because sometimes there's also something that can be considered that goes on to because for example, for some religions and for some spiritual practices, there's a moment in which there's a sacred moment, in which there's a sacred ceremony, there's a sacred circle, there's a sacred something. But for us, mostly everything in every moment is sacred. Whenever you do the ceremony, you consider things different.
Hold on, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just pulling over to get some gas. Hold on. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, sorry about that. What were we talking about? Something about the ceremony and the perceptions?
No, what I was saying is that whenever you began to apply this, you began to feel respect and you began also to live the moment, be present. Because there's something that is kind of I think is not well conducted in what is the appreciation of ceremony time, say the average time. It's like there's like, whoa, in this moment you have to be clean, wash your feet, wash your hands, put on the special bone feather bonnet, or put on your special clothes because we're going to, I don't know, talk to God. And then it is supposed that the ceremony is going to provide the specific stuff. And that is an idea that is not quite correct. Everything in every moment you have a contact, a dialogue with nature, a dialogue with different ways of a consciousness. You need know the big jade call, neck collar, or the beautiful clothes. Do it just because you like it, but that is not the step, or that is not any specific. Everything is alive. Every moment is sacred in a sense. You can do the magic by being present first of all. Forget about like the ceremonies moment. Well, yes, it's in a specific particular moment in which you are devoted and you can dress beautifully if you will want, but take into account that every moment is sacred. Everything, your life can end in any moment. So respect yourself by being present in all the time. Live your life as a continuous ceremony, being respectful. Talk to the elements, talk to the wind, be, which you can be in the middle of everything. You need no specifics like doing that. So that's another thing that I found that the language or the specific ways of the Mayan philosophy can lead you to.
Yeah, I think sometimes people get really caught up in symbols. Like washing your feet is sort of symbolic, but then the symbol becomes the main focus rather than it's just a metaphor for something. But you miss the point.
Yeah, yeah, well, and sometimes that's the only thing that people consider.
I know. Well,
Uh,
it's sort of like if you study math, there's really two ways you can do it. You can memorize everything, or you can learn how to derive formulas just by sort of massaging different facts or something like that. So one of them is just you're a robot and you're just reciting the textbook, and the other producing formulas or something like that. Do you understand? It's basically like being able to follow the recipe or being able to make a recipe, something like that.
yeah, yeah. Well, well. How then? For the next days that we're going to go to onto these specific celebrations, and by the way, there's for every culture, it seems that there's already a way of honoring the dead. Well, this is my way, and I already give you some ideas. But if you can add them to your present day time, it's not morbid, it's not cause you anxiousness or something. And preparation, the morning way that you have been experienced are going to cease, and that you are going to be mourning on those ones that you miss, or maybe in the other
Well,
way that missed you.
I have a historical question. Like, do you know the history of the Day of the Dead and when it first began and like on the Catholic calendar and in Mexico and stuff? Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, but it's unnecessary to talk about that. That is whenever you will want, you can Google it.
Google it. Yeah, no, fair enough, fair enough. Because
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because for us outside of Mexico, like it seems that the Day of the Dead seems very indigenous. Of course, it's on a different calendar, but we don't have the Day of the Dead in Canada, not at all. And so when we see it, it looks very Mexican.
But in reality, it has like 80% of medieval conception of doing stuff for the dead. That's why, as I said, it looks very indigenous, and every native, let's say, nation, or every let's say community, there can be small differences in every place, but when you go deep into which is that could be the affectation of, as I said, what is the Western, or what was the European with the invaders that came to blend a medieval calendar with local traditions. When you go deep into the linguistics and some of the stuff that you can analyze, you can see that there was another conception of what that is. And through the ceremonies, you can see that yes, mostly there are mixed blood, mestizo ways of doing the ceremony, which are more affected by this medieval conception of the Catholicism. But you can go deep. For example, in the case of Mexico and Guatemala, there are so many divergence, or there are some diverse communities that you can learn by looking at them, at the differences, but also the particularities of some of them. There's this so much community in Maya community in the peninsula, which they onboarded the dead, and they clean them, and they feed them, and they put them back on the coffin once again. And there are so many ways, and you can see that some of them already escape what was the biggest pressure from the medieval religion that was brought to Mesoamerica. But yes, it is true. In the mestizo, in the syncretic, there's even more European than the natives, but it's okay.
Well, another thing actually that I have just been recently learning about is, back to the linguistics, is you keep saying mestiza, like, I, for me, if I research about Mexico, it comes up as Aztec, but, I found, at least maybe you can correct me on this, that it's better to say mestiza rather than Aztec.
Well, it depends. For example, Aztec is not even the appropriate. It should be Mexica. Aztec is the first steps of this Nahua tribe that later are going to be called themselves to be Mexica, but after no
Mexica.
more than a century, they were already Mexica. They were already expulsed from the island and punished, heavily punished by the Spaniard conquistadores. So what it comes later is precisely the syncretic ways, the mixing, the blending of both traditions. And there's a moment in which you will never know which was, because there's people that says, I practice pre-Hispanic stuff, but sometimes there's not a way to really know in which point the medieval Catholic influence ends and which it was the authentic native or ancient way of doing the ceremony. There's a moment in which you have to consider the blending or the syncretism as the only thing that you can still practice, because there's no way to understand or to go that back to try to, let's say, to try to clean your tradition from an influence. There are some things that are already like that, and you cannot change it. That's stupid and useless, by the way. So in Mexico, there was and we can talk about all the Americans, the Peruvian, and everything that happened, let's say, in the Mapuche lands or Araucanos or Mapuche lands, and people in all the Americas, everything that things that you don't really know to which point it is European and to which point is a native. But as I said, and I have been saying, and the main reason of this podcast as I begin, it's like if you go deep into what is the linguistics and what is the basic, let's say, dynamics of understanding that, then you're going to see that you can go deep into some more of what death be alive, what a ceremony is, even what a ceremony is. At the end, what is a ceremony, right? And there's a way to go deep, but you have to really, really, really go into that. You can Google data as that. There's a Mexican researcher, a woman that has been writing, and every year she's quoted saying, "Day of the Days is 80% an European invention," and stuff like that. Well, yes. Well, let's talk about the remaining 20.
Yeah, linguistics and perception. I think that's the right order of
Yeah.
approaching this. Um,
Yes.
okay, I have one more question. It's kind of off topic, but just because I wanted to ask about the Aztecs and using the word Mexica, correctly, is the word Olmec. So it's another animal, I know, but can you talk about that word?
Which word?
The word Olmec.
Olmec. Well, now we shift completely the conversation and we enter into something that you will want to know beyond the basic theme we are talking about. Well, Olmec it defines what is not yet really very well understood in time, but understood as a cultural manifestation of a people, of a different communities or different peoples. It has been said that it's the
Totally. I'm
mother.
sorry. It's another conversation. I'm so
You changed the conversation, but the Olmec it is told to be the mother of all the later civilizations. But there's also proof that there was another civilization before the Olmecs. Although the Olmecs are always thought to be the beginners, well, you can track them through their cultural manifestations. What is the most specific and obvious is the big giant Olmec heads, which are amazing, by the way. And there are too many, and it's so peculiar because now is there's a full, let's say, I think, useless debate that are said to be produced by black people and denying now once again the natives from the
That's why I
lands.
don't like the Olmec thing, is because I see it as denying, like, who, where does the word Olmec come from? It comes from a university in New York. Nobody, you can't ask any Olmecs who speaks Olmec language. There is no linguistic
Well,
base for it.
the point is that Olmec is Uli. It is a name that precisely the Mexica peoples began to apply for to talk about the people that were living in those places. But in a sense, nobody knows how they call themselves. It's a later classification. Even in pre-Hispanic times, there was a they called them the Olmecs, but
Oh,
as
I
for
didn't
example,
know that. That's
well,
very
man,
good.
you have to read. Yeah, the Olmec. The
Well,
same thing
that's why I asked
happens
you.
with
Yeah,
okay. Okay, your question.
finished.
I cannot hear you correctly.
Sorry, I said that's why I asked you, is because to clarify. So that's why. But please continue talking.
Well, yes, the same happens with Teotihuacan, the city that is called the city in which the gods were like born. But nobody knows the name of the city. And there's a big debate of which was the language that was used. There's already so many things that has to be or to continually be studied. But fortunately, there's enough also good knowledge and good stuff to do. But that is something that is beyond what I do as a spiritual guide. I can follow the I do the readings because I'm interested in everything, but you have to go deep into books and go deep into articles about that specific stuff. There's always a problem. There's always things about like the Toltec influence in the peninsula, or what is in related to be a Toltec, what is a Toltec civilization, that's another one. And there's so many things that has to be studied in time, but I don't know.
Well, it's interesting because for us, talking to you, who speaks a Mayan language, then it's for the outside world, we can peer inside of Mesoamerica just a little bit, and then so it's such a fascinating place that we have millions of questions, and
Yeah.
and there's no entry point and no good one. But talking to you, especially for me, is such a good entry point, you know.
Well, yes, we don't have to follow media, but there are good places in which you can learn things about language, about historical, archaeological, and I do also have a Facebook page in which I share articles about this, and even the other ones, like going back to the subject, like for example, the other day I shared something that says that maybe the universe is aware of itself. And the other day I found one that says that scientists finally discovered how plants are thinking beings. Stuff like that for us is more than a fact. For us is not even let's say, for us it's not like a believing, it's not a folklorical way, it's not just like this beautiful Indian or native tale that the elder says. It's not like that. It's a fact for us.
Well,
And sometimes I put I share it is called Mayan Science. Is in Facebook, and I share in English and in Spanish or in any language that I found. There's a French article about doulas the emphasis on the mother for birthing. And I shared articles that I found good for the understanding of this, but consciousness and this, well, they think that the plants finally have a way of communication, right? uh,
Yeah, that's one of the problems with the word science. I feel skeptical of that word actually because it's supposed to mean, discernment, but it's sort of like, well, if you say so, then I'll believe it. Like I'll believe if you say scientist, then I'll believe whatever you say. And there's no discernment at all. It's like nobody's even thinking. They're just like, oh, plants can think now. Yesterday they couldn't, today they can. And it's like, use your brain, think. So,
think a
you
little bit, yes.
there's so much stuff like that where like you've been screaming at the top of your lungs for forever, you know this is the thing, and nobody listens, and suddenly now somebody wearing a white jacket says it, and wow, this is suddenly a new fact, and it's such a headache.
That's it. Well, I think that we can finish now. It's
I think
for
so, yeah.
people. Yeah, because people, I don't want people to be exhausted. And for people also to understand this, maybe they can begin to apply ways of understanding language and perception in a different way, which is what I said. Everything is alive, everything has a way of consciousness, but being that is a way of consciousness that is not human is in reality irrelevant. But you can do the change by applying what I have said to the dead, or the dead in a way, or the undead, or they are alive in a way, not physically, or dead in a way, or alive in another way. So
Fantastic. Thank you.
yeah.
Have a good night, and
Have a good
everybody
night.
else, shoga cup.
Sure.
Thanks everybody for listening to the podcast once again. Please don't forget to share and like and subscribe, and just if you guys want to send a message to me in a Papillon, please don't hesitate to. I want to give a special thanks to our listeners in Spain, in Finland, in Ireland, in Slovenia, of course Mexico, United States, Australia, Brazil, Canada, Guatemala, and of course here in Japan. Everybody, thanks a lot. Keep on living the Zolkeen. Peace and love.